Some of the most famous serial killers are those that have never been identified. Others remain famous even after they're caught. Thankfully, these disturbing individuals are off the streets and are held accountable for their crimes. Number 5. There are a disturbing number of cases of medical professionals purposefully taking the lives of people in their care. Many of those cases feature people who believe they're helping their victims at the end of their lives. That wasn't the case for Victorino Chua. Chua has been convicted of taking the lives of 2 of his patients by poisoning them with insulin. But countless others were also poisoned, and at least 3 others passed away after receiving the medicine that had been tampered with. The crimes took place at Stepping Hill Hospital in 2011 and 2012. Chua was a Filipino nurse who moved to the UK in 2002. Throughout his career, both in the Philippines and the UK, he had issues with stealing. Many of the thefts were of money, but he also stole medication. That didn't stop him from getting recommendations though, and in 2009, he received a staff role at the Stockport Hospital. Chua didn't fit in well at the hospital. There were accusations against patients that he gave them unnecessary treatment. The staff also found problems with his interpersonal skills. Chua claimed he was mistreated by the patients and staff, and wrote in a rambling letter that his treatment had caused an angel to turn evil. In 2011, he began tampering with saline bags that would be issued to patients. Chua added a large amount of insulin to the bags. While insulin is important for all humans, too much can cause low glucose levels and cause patients to become hypoglycemic. The condition can cause damage to the brain and the central nervous system. It can also cause irreversible damage and cost lives. At first, it wasn't clear what had happened, but the medical staff then noticed that some of the saline bags would appear to be frothing. The tampering was uncovered, but figuring out who wouldn't be as easy. In July of 2011, a nurse named Rebecca Lighton was arrested. Her fingerprints were found on contaminated bags, and police found Facebook posts where she claimed she drank alcohol and partied to cope with the stresses of her job. After 6 weeks, the police dropped the case against Rebecca. It was only after Chua changed his methods that he was finally caught. Apparently no longer content with leaving it to chance that his poison would be used, he edited medical records to order unnecessary medication for patients. It was easier to link him to those changes, and police determined that he had access to the saline bags on every occasion of poisoning. He pleaded not guilty, but was found guilty of taking the lives of 2 patients, as well as causing harm to countless others. Number 4. Friends and neighbors of Irina Guida Machak knew her as a loving mother that helped out at her daughter's school. Her husband knew that she had an alcohol problem, but never realized the lengths that she would go to get a drink. Guida Machak was born in the Soviet Union and eventually met and married her husband, Yuri. At first, things seemed well, but Guida Machak already had an alcohol problem. It became so bad that Yuri took away access to their money, worrying that she would spend it all on vodka. Despite this, she continued to find ways to get alcohol, all while putting up an image as a regular mother. At the same time, throughout the 2000s, elderly women in the area were living in fear. The crime started in June of 2002. An elderly woman was found in her home with severe wounds to her head. It looked as if she'd been struck with a hammer. Money had been stolen from her purse, but it amounted to less than $25. Over the next 8 years, 17 more women would fall foul to this disturbing criminal. At first, police believed they were looking for a man. It seemed the only possibility when the crimes were so violent. But that would be proven not to be true when one victim escaped the so-called monster of Russia. The elderly woman was found on the floor of her apartment with a significant head wound. Her apartment had been ransacked, but only a small amount of money had been taken. While in the hospital, she told police it was a woman who had attacked her. At first, police believed she was mentally unwell and that it was simply a man in a dress. But the victim continued to insist, and eventually she was believed. Police were now on the hunt for a woman. Thousands of people were interviewed, and a woman named Marina Valieva was arrested. Marina confessed to the crimes under pressure from the police, but the attacks continued. It was only after a 17th woman lost her life to the serial killer that police identified the real culprit. The final victim was an 81-year-old named Alexandra, Neighbors got a good look at the woman who had come to decorate Alexandra's flat and gave a description to police when Alexandra's body was discovered. 5 days after a police sketch was issued, Guida Machak was identified as the criminal. She confessed at first and told police that she'd taken the lives of her victims so that she could have money for alcohol. In court, she tried to deny her crimes but was still found guilty. She was sentenced to just 20 years in prison. Number 3. In 2010, a string of robberies claimed the lives of 4 people. It was only after the culprit tried to use the ATM card of his final victim that he was caught. John Wesley Ewell already had a lengthy criminal record when he was arrested in 2010 for shoplifting. The crimes varied from armed robbery to burglary to check forgery. His latest crime was swapping the price tags on items at a Home Depot store. Living in California, Ewell could be handed a life sentence for felony crimes after his first 2 convictions under the 3-strike rule. In Los Angeles, though, the rule only came into effect if the 3rd crime was violent. Ewell was a prominent campaigner against the 3-strike rule altogether and had appeared on a TV show to discuss it. Ewell was handed a 32-month sentence for his Home Depot crime, but it was postponed so that he could undergo a pre-scheduled surgery. Ewell decided to use that time to commit more violent crimes. His first victim was 80-year-old Hannah Morcos. After breaking into the Morcos' home, Ewell encountered Hannah. Rather than fleeing, Ewell violently attacked the elderly man and triggered a heart attack. Hannah's body was discovered by his family the next day. A few weeks later, Ewell took the life of his second victim, Denise Roberts, who lived on the same street as Ewell, but he apparently didn't have any issues with committing crimes close to home. He tied up the 53-year-old woman and took her life before ransacking her home. Just 9 days later, Limon and Robin Turnage were attacked. Ewell posed as a utility worker to gain entry into their home before attacking the couple. They were also tied up before Ewell took their lives. Sadly, it was a few days before their bodies were discovered after concerned family members asked police to perform a welfare check. Police investigating the crime were surprised when Robin's card was used at an ATM. Cameras at the machine captured a clear image of the culprit, someone the police were very familiar with. After Ewell was arrested, it was discovered that he'd sold items from the robberies at pawn shops, solidifying his connection to the 2 earlier robberies. He pleaded no contest to the crimes and will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 2. Jeffrey Mait is a disturbing criminal who earned the nickname the Rhode Island Ripper. He took the lives of 3 women between 2002 and 2003 and attacked 2 others who barely escaped with their lives. The first victim was a woman named Audrey Harris. Audrey, like all of the victims of the Ripper, was a street worker. Like the other victims, though, she wasn't somebody who would be missed. On February 9th, 2003, she said goodbye to her mother and told her that she would visit her later that day. The visit never happened, and Audrey's mother reported her missing. The police seemingly took the case seriously. There had been an attack against another woman in the same profession named Jane Smith, and police suspected Audrey may have been the victim of the same attacker. Then the man attacked another woman who survived, Christine Dumont. The man was identified as Timothy Scanlon. But before Scanlon could go to trial, Christine also disappeared in May of 2004. Scanlon would later be found guilty of attacking Smith, but cleared of any involvement in the 2 missing women. In July of 2004, a third woman in the same profession disappeared. Stacy Goulet was reported missing by her boyfriend. Police tried using an undercover policewoman to lure out the criminal, but the Ripper didn't take the bait. It was only after a mysterious, anonymous call that the case was blown open. The caller was a male who told them to speak to Jocelyn Martin. Jocelyn told police that she'd been attacked by one of her clients. He had taken her back to his home, then attacked her from behind. She'd fought back and managed to escape. Given her career, she hadn't gone to the police, but now she gave them all the details they needed to identify the Ripper's address. Police also learned that a second woman had been attacked at the address and survived. The man who lived there was Jeffrey Mait. At first, he denied any involvement, but a search of his home uncovered a disturbing scene in his bathroom. It was here that he dealt with the bodies. Mait confessed to taking the lives of Audrey, Christine, and Stacy. He had dealt with their remains in the bathtub, put them in trash bags, and dumped the remains in commercial dumpsters. A search of a landfill located Stacy's remains, but the 2 other victims were never found. Number 1. In July of 1993, London police issued a CCTV image of the victim of a suspected serial killer and an unidentified man believed to be the culprit. This piece of evidence was what finally brought about the downfall of Colin Ireland. The crimes had started in March of that year. Peter Walker was a successful West End choreography director. He was also a homosexual and visited the Colin Club in Earl's Court. The pub was popular with homosexual men, who would wear different colored handkerchiefs to show what kind of thing they enjoyed. Walker was approached by a man who invited him back to his home. Peter's body was found under his duvet. Later, the criminal responsible called the national newspaper to take credit for the crime, but expressed remorse for leaving Peter's dog trapped in the apartment. The call was the first of many Colin Ireland would make. Ireland was a 39-year-old, 2-time divorcee who was unemployed at the time. He had concluded the year before that he was a nobody, and for his New Year's resolution, he decided to change that by becoming a serial killer. He hated homosexual men, according to one of his ex-wives, and saw them as easy victims. In particular, he targeted men who would fight against being tied up. After Peter, Ireland's next victim was Christopher Dunn, a librarian and another visitor of the Colin Club. The crime was even more disturbing, and again, Ireland contacted the press and the police to taunt them about his crime. An American businessman named Perry Bradley and a nursing home attendant named Andrew Collier would also become victims. Their passings would be separated by less than a week. It was only after the 4th crime that police were able to identify patterns. As well as the method in each crime, police identified their last known location as the Colin Club. The relationship between the British police and the homosexual community was not great at the time, which may have been why certain similarities were overlooked. But the police finally took action to warn the homosexual community, handing out flyers at Pride events to try to get more information. They were also spurred on by another call from Ireland, who said that he would attack once a week if he wasn't caught. Ireland's final victim was discovered on June 15th, though the crime took place 3 days earlier. Emanuel Spiteri was a chief who was last seen at Colin Club on June 12th. He left with a man described as having a full face, short dark hair, and discolored teeth. Police then located a CCTV image of Emanuel and their suspect at the tube station. Ireland came forward and identified himself as the man in the photo, but he said he had gone to Emanuel's apartment with him but left him there with another man. But police found Ireland's fingerprints at Andrew Collier's home. He eventually confessed to his crimes, telling police that he wanted to be famous. He was handed 5 life sentences and spent the rest of his life behind bars. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knott, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.